Hey, it's Shiv,
And Dave,
and we're back with the All of You podcast. Today, I want to talk about the thoughts that create narratives in our mind and the ways that those thoughts can impact us.
such an important thing to be aware of.
Absolutely. I think I had a slight awareness of how our thoughts, or I should say, how my thoughts impact me, but until really diving into inner work, didn't fully grasp the weight of how my thoughts impacted me. And I'm actually hoping in this episode to be able to share a little bit about what my thoughts were and how they held me back, in hopes that that resonates with others and they can start kind of questioning their own thoughts.
Yeah, let's talk about our experience with our thoughts. The people that talk to themselves, I think we think it's like the crazy unhoused people wandering the streets, and it's not.
No, we all have an internal dialogue
hmm
ongoing in our minds all day long.
Yeah. And so for us to start to realize that and be aware of it is huge. So what has your journey been like with self-talk and understanding your self-talk?
I was aware that I always had a narrative going on in my head. What I wasn't aware of was that I could actually question and change my narrative. And the narrative that I still fight is really talking to myself so critically. I think that's common. Like, I think everyone's probably heard the phrase, like, we're our own worst critic. But if you were to come into my head and hear the way that I speak to myself at times, you would be like, you are nasty, you are mean, and you are cruel. Like, how dare you talk to someone like that? If you actually heard some of the thoughts in my head that I say to myself. And when you talk to yourself like that, you start to actually believe those things unless you question them. So I'll have these thoughts in my head where I'm like, I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I'm an imposter. And those are actually not even some of my worst ones, to be completely honest. If they're not questioned, if I just let myself talk to myself like that, I believe it. Then my reality is I actually believe that I'm not smart enough or good enough. When that is my core belief about myself, or any belief, if that is the belief I have about myself, then that's how I'm going to carry myself in the world. And so, to make a tangible example of that, starting this podcast, the thoughts in my head, I think the number one thought I had was, who am I to do this? Like, there's so many other people that would be better at it, more qualified. I'm an imposter. Who am I to do this? And I had to get really curious with myself and go, is that true? Like, yeah, it might be true that there's people that are better at this than me, but is it also true that everyone sucks at something they're new at and they're first trying it out? So maybe the reality is I'm just learning.
hmm
And it's not that I'm not good enough, it's that I actually haven't even done it. And so how do I know I'm not good enough unless I've done it? So starting to actually learn how to have those internal conversations with myself of, wait, hold on, that's not true. Or maybe if it's not true, let's at least have some fun questioning with it and playing with what the reality is in my head. These thoughts come up to try to keep us safe. Like, why do I have the thought that, there's someone better at this than me and I shouldn't do it, I'm not good enough? I'm really trying to save myself from the embarrassment of if this fails, or the people who are talking about me being like, can you see that Siobhan Roy has a podcast now? That's so weird. Like, she's really gone off the deep end, right? Like, it's me trying to save myself from that pain, which all of that is actually a reality. I know people are saying that. So that's another thought had to learn how to fight.
People are saying all kinds of different things. Whatever they're choosing to think and say is up to them.
Yeah. And so that's how I had to like go into that thought and start questioning, like, do I actually care if people think that
You've gone nuts.
I've gone nuts? Nah, there's probably a little truth to
You
it.
drank the self-help tea so much that you started a podcast.
Yeah, I did. I'm drunk on that tea for sure. All of that to say, if I didn't question the narratives in my head that were critical and unkind, I would never have gotten the place to take the risks that I've taken in my life. If you believe the stories in your mind that tell you you can't do something, you're not capable, you're not good enough, you're not lovable, then that's going to create your reality. It's actually as simple as like someone who doesn't believe that they're worthy of having a partner that treats them well, doesn't believe they're worthy of love, they're not going to find love. They're not going to find a partner that treats them well, because if you don't believe you're worthy of it, you will not find it, because your thoughts will actually create your reality.
Speaking for myself, I had trouble understanding that for a long time. For a long time, I didn't even know that I had self-talk. So like if I was listening to this 5-10 years ago, I would not have understood what you're saying at all. I would have thought it was some foo-foo weird thing, because I didn't understand. I wasn't in a place of awareness to separate myself from the self-talk. The self-talk was me. The dialogue in my head that was running all day, the narrative that was in my subconscious, was all that I was. I was nothing more or than that. So if you would have asked me how I felt about something, I would have told you what I was thinking, not an actual feeling. A lot of people live in this way. They think their thoughts are their feelings. So they are just reactive to their thoughts all day long, and not realizing that they have a spirit or an identity that's different from the mind. And if you just identify with the mind and you don't realize you're a body and spirit also, then you are going to be a slave to your thoughts, because you're only identifying with the thoughts of the brain. And those are mostly subconscious thoughts from patterning, from your lived experience. So there's no way to change. If you're just listening to your subconscious thoughts all day long, like this is where I was at. I would be working in the yard or trying to do something, and I would just have this narrative screaming at me, I'm not good enough. The narrative that I had was always this oppressor. It was me and it was my voice, but it was always through the lens of you're not enough, you're not good enough. And even if I saw something that sparked my attention that like I wanted or desired, like a truck or a house or something, the narrative would be you're not enough unless you get that, unless you have that thing, or a piece of clothing. You're not cool enough until you have that. If you had that, you'd be so much cooler. You'd be so much better. If you show up with that thing, how's everybody going to view you if you show up to surf with an old board, or if you don't have the new model snowboard or the boots? Like,
drive up to the party in the beater car.
yeah. And this is how this shifted. Once I learned how to communicate to myself better, I could reality check myself. So I drive a 2013 Subaru with 150,000 miles on it. I was a director for my company, pulling up to my office every day, and
with a car that was worse than people who are at the lowest level in the organization.
Pretty much one of the older cars. Like all the people that 90% of the people that work for me had nicer cars than I have. And if you're not reality checking yourself, I'm pulling up and I'm seeing nice trucks. I see a Tundra. I see somebody drove like my dream Tundra that worked there. I don't know who you were, but this nice white Tundra is probably I think it was one of my employees. And I really struggled when I would park next to it. The reality is, when I got my last promotion, I could have went out and gotten $1,000 car payment if I really wanted to. I could have qualified for the loan. I could have done this, but I had a deeper desire to not be in debt and to try to save for things that were important to me, or do work on the house that I thought would benefit the family more. And we've had different financial goals. So the reality check is, you're doing this for a reason, and the car doesn't say anything about you. But that negative self-talk left unchecked would have eaten me alive. And it did eat me alive when I was younger. It's the reason I bought cars that I shouldn't have bought, motorcycles I shouldn't have bought. It's the reason I was a slave to my homes that I owned, trying to build decks and build all these things so that when I had an event, people would see me a certain way. Or and I didn't know this consciously. It was all subconscious, but it was self-talk left unchecked. So the longer that went on, the more I was just a slave to my life. You're just a slave to your self-talk if you're not able to become aware of it and reality check it to align with your long-term goals. If you're just listening to the self-talk on your drives, "Oh, I should have that car I want, or that house that somebody has, or this thing that somebody else has, this piece of clothing because that's going to make me so much cooler," you're going to be a slave and feel like you need to buy those things, but they might not align with your long-term goals. You might be a slave to your insecurities in a relationship because you're not able to check the self-talk of, that person does love you. You're just in a little bit of pain because you're insecure about this other thing. And now you're going to convince yourself that they don't love you and self-sabotage the relationship because you're a slave to the self-talk. You have to be, if you want to achieve anything long-term in life, you have to be able to combat and reality check your self-talk to get what you want long term.
So, so true. I was thinking about that in a work capacity as well. If your self talk is saying, like, I'm not good enough or smart enough, you're not volunteering to take on those extra projects to get you the promotion that you really want. So, if the long term goal is you want to climb the ladder and be the director, but you have this narrative in your head that says, like, oh, I can't do that. I'm not good enough. And you don't fight that and say, I'm willing to take a shot on myself and take on an extra project and see what I could do with it. You'll never actually get to where you want to go. And what's interesting is your skills didn't change, your intelligence didn't change. Nothing about you is any different other than the narrative in your mind saying, I'm capable or I'm not capable.
Yeah.
And so if we believe that we're not capable, we'll never do what we actually want to do in life.
Mm-hmm.
It'll always hold you back. But we are all capable of far more than we can fathom. But we're slave to our minds telling us, oh, don't take that risk. Play it safe. What if you fail? Everyone's going to laugh at you. Don't do it. But that's not even true. What if you fail? It's like that's where I learned how to question my self-talk, was like, when it comes up and it's like, what if I fail? What's going to happen? I'm going to move on. I'll,
You'll
on to
learn
the next
something.
thing. I'll have learned. And then next time I start over, I won't be starting over as a newbie. I'm starting over with experience that I can apply. I actually would almost say, like, is failure even real? Or am I just gaining more skills on my journey? What is failure? If this podcast doesn't quote unquote make it, did it fail?
No.
No, it didn't fail. I don't even think failure is real, but in my mind, I can get caught up on that and be like, "Oh no, I don't want to fail," and then leave it there. So that's where my mind goes, because it's like, that's the gatekeeper. That's like, that thought's going to keep me safe. But pushing past that thought into the questioning and getting curious and going, okay, so what if I fail? I'll be okay.
Yeah, like if you fail, I mean, you can tell me what you think, but like if if I fail, I think, oh, what are they going to think of me? What's everyone going to think of me if I fail? And the reality is, what if they think really poorly? What if they have really bad thoughts about you because they fail? Well, then they probably weren't the best people anyway, because anyone that judges someone for trying something and failing isn't really like, that's kind of a low
Honestly,
vibration anyway.
it's probably someone who's never tried something.
Yeah.
When I think of it tangibly, how I learned to question my thoughts, it was really hard in the beginning because we all live in autopilot until we consciously make the decision not to live in autopilot. And by that, I mean, I was just listening to my narrative and acting it out and thinking all of my thoughts were true. And so when I started to realize not all my thoughts are true and that I do have to take my thoughts captive, it was hard to do it on the spot. And that's where meditation came in from me. And I would just sit on the ground and not aim for calm, not aim for peace, but just aim to go, okay, what thoughts are going to float through my head? And when they'd float through and one would pop up, I would go, oh, that's an interesting one. Do I believe that one? Yeah. Yeah, it kind of checks out. Okay. And then another one would come through and I'd be like, whoa, I'm capable of thinking that. That is crazy. Absolutely out there. I don't believe that thought, but I'm capable of thinking it. But I'm going to detach from that one and just let that thought keep floating through my head. And that practice generated an awareness, and it kind of started to ingrain in me that not all my thoughts are true. So some I just need to let keep floating through my head and notice it and go, ooh, you're getting a little weird there, Siobhan. And then let it go and not attach. And that practice started in meditation, but the more I did it, I now do that in my everyday life. Like we had friends over for dinner last night, and I had a thought that came across my head at the table that I was like, I don't think they like me. And then I like went, no, these are your really good friends. They drove an hour here to see you and they're having fun and laughing at your table, eating dinner. You're really like, that was just a really,
Super normal thought, though.
yeah, I was like, that was just a really self
They
conscious
probably had
thought.
that thought at one point, and I probably did too.
Yeah.
It
And
happens all the time when you hang out with people. Have a quick, like, do they like me? It's just a fear, and it's just a fearful thought that pops up.
yeah, but it's not based in reality. And so it went through my head and I let it go right back out and then joined right back into the conversation without anyone noticing any insecurities or lack of confidence. It was just like, whereas I could have let that thought fester and gotten really self conscious. And then that would have turned into me maybe not engaging as much because I'm self conscious about myself and, engaging in the conversation as much. So that practice, it started slow in meditation and just like learning how to do it as gaining that muscle is what I would say. And now I find myself doing it all day long. And I would say like I aim to be the watcher of my thoughts.
Yeah.
And in doing that, I'm more confident. I'm more in reality. And my anxiety is way better because I'm able to notice, like, oh, that's just an anxious thought, not based in truth. I don't actually need to believe that. I'm going to just let it go instead of like sitting on it and kind of letting it fester within me.
Yeah. And a lot of people know this stuff. Like a lot of people do that. And I had heard it for years, meditate, watch your thoughts. But until I started to practice it and strengthen that muscle, because it's just a muscle that you strengthen, that you're detaching from the mind. You're no longer identifying with the thoughts and personalizing them. You're detaching and more personalizing and identifying with your spirit. And then you can just watch your brain kind of go, and really it's your subconscious. Your subconscious is going to go wild. It's going to problem solve. It's going to think thoughts based on past patterns. And so it's always, you walk into a room and it thinks 100 thoughts of calculating things, and it's like protecting you, right? But over time, you learn to not identify with all of them and just kind of observe all those thoughts. But I would say that the opposite is true when you are reactive to it. If you have spent your whole life, like I did, a slave to my thoughts, literally just reactive to every thought that I had and personalizing every thought that I had without knowing it, I wasn't choosing that, they would come up and they would hurt, and I would just let the narrative run. Sometimes I'd let the narrative run all day. Like if I had music on and headphones working in the yard, it's possible that I had a negative narrative running for hours and hours because I catch it now. I'll catch this negative narrative and I go, whoa, I've been in this negative narrative for a half hour now. I gotta do something. Like I gotta stop what I'm doing and do something different, or try different things and tools to get out of this funk, or listen to a book, or stop listening to this type of music. Like whatever I have to do to just alert myself, this is unhealthy. But if anyone's like I was and you let it run all day long, how does that affect your work? How does that affect, if you show up at work every day and you don't feel like you belong there, and you don't feel like you appreciate the job, and you don't feel good about yourself, it could be other people making you feel that way a bit, but you have to take accountability for your thoughts and go, I deserve to be here. I got the job. I'm qualified. I'm capable. So unless they tell me otherwise, I need to have some self-confidence and stability and groundedness, and change my thoughts as I walk in the building to appreciate the job, to appreciate the whatever it is that you appreciate about it. But if you're just having these negative narratives run, it can go sideways on you.
Yeah. Something I've also learned about the narratives in my head as well is the narratives that play frequently, like the movies of my mind that are constant and pop up a lot of my negative self-talk. They're also an indicator to me that there could be a wound beneath them, because if you're having this constant thought of like, and I've spoken about this one before, but like I'll have this narrative that runs through my mind of like, I'm not smart enough. And because that narrative ran so frequently in my mind, it made me realize, where is this coming from? Because God didn't say I'm not smart enough. He didn't make me not smart enough. He made me perfect. So where is this coming from that I'm believing this? And that made me go in and do the work to uncover, okay, when did that first, like when did I hear that first? Like, oh, I heard that at school. Oh, okay, like who told me that? And how many times did I hear that? And like I was able to kind of craft, or not craft, but uncover the story, the origin story of that thought. And when I uncover that origin story of the thought, then I can go back in and recreate the movie as it was intended to be taught to me. So by that, I mean, I can go back into myself and say, okay, little Shiv, when your teacher made fun of you for not being able to do that math problem, like that was on your teacher. That was their lack of knowing how to speak to a child in a way that they should have. And that was them being inappropriate. And honestly, they were probably at their wits' end and had a rough day. It didn't actually have anything to do with you, because you were in third grade. Of course you thought times tables were hard, and I'm able to go and look. you can actually do times tables now. So maybe you just didn't learn it as fast as the other kids in class, but you always exceeded every other kid when it came to social skills. So maybe you're just not, you've never been the mathematician, but your social skills have always been off the Richter. So that's where your smarts are. You are really smart, but not in every single area. You're not gifted at everything. And that's okay. Like you can use your gifts. You are intelligent. So I can recreate that narrative and it's not even recreating a narrative. It's honestly telling myself what the truth is and replacing the story that little Siobhan believed that wasn't actually true, but her little kid self thought was with the actual reality. And then starting to like, when those thoughts come up, go, hey, remember what the reality is. And then going back to that. And the more that happens, where the thought comes up and I replace it with the truth instead of the lie, then I'm reprogramming myself. So I'm healing that old wound and I'm reprogramming myself to believe what the actual truth is about me. And the more I do that, my patterns change. The wound is healing. And that thought, I don't really struggle with that thought anymore. That one used to be so prevalent all the time in my head. And it isn't really there anymore. It comes up every now and then, but nothing like it used to. And I'm excited to get to share that because I hope that that resonates with someone and that that can send someone else on a journey to be able to do that because it's so freeing to no longer be a slave to the lies in your mind. To be able to break those chains is why I'm able to actually be on this podcast. If I still believed the lies that told me I wasn't smart enough or good enough, I would not be here. And I now have an opportunity to help others. And that's freaking cool. And that's something I'm passionate about. But if I didn't do that work, I wouldn't have arrived here. And I say all of that because it's life changing and it's worth it.
Yeah, I think of people who go through midlife crises, or a lot of people in midlife end up not being fulfilled and happy with the things that they thought would make them fulfilled and happy. And I was kind of one of those. I think when we're younger, we think when we get married and have kids or have a house or the car we want or a certain amount of money, we're going to be happy. And a lot of people get there and they're not happy. So they burn it all to the ground and then they try a different way, like, oh, go travel or pursue some other venture that you think is going to make you happy. And if anyone has worked their ass off to get where they are and they have all these things and they're finding themselves not happy, I would venture to say it's probably because of the way you talk to yourself. The one thing that nothing outside of you can give you is a good internal narrative. So if you have a nice house and you have a nice car, if you have the kids, if you have the relationship, if you have all the things that you want and you find yourself not happy, check your thought life. Because if you are sitting in a multi-million-dollar home and you, with all the furniture you want and the style you want, and you can buy any clothes that you want, and you aren't happy, it might be your mind that's driving you crazy. And it's hard to admit that. It's really hard to ask for help. And sometimes it's really hard to be aware and even come to the awareness that your thoughts are doing it to you. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that your own mind can turn against you. But a lot of us pick up thoughts when we're younger that are unhealthy, and no one's in there with us to know. If our parents knew, they might help us. But a lot of kids don't want to tell their parents that they're thinking bad thoughts about themselves. And so if you hide those and you just don't tell anyone, they get louder and louder and louder, especially when you think, oh, when I get that car, get that job, or have that relationship, or have those kids, I'm going to be happy. And this narrative will finally stop. No, nothing can stop the narrative unless you do the work to change the narrative internally. Nothing outwardly can actually change your internal narrative. So as we go through life, how you feel isn't determined by your job, isn't determined by your relationship, isn't determined by your kids, isn't determined by your house, the money you make, the clothes you wear, the cool stuff, the tattoos, the anything. Nothing can change how you feel about yourself except your internal narrative. And if your internal narrative is off, there's some work to do. But you can change it. But you have to first identify that that's the problem. And so many people, including myself, go our whole lives ignoring that being the problem. We don't want to admit that's the problem. It's actually one of the easier things to change. It's a lot easier than going to law school and trying to get a degree and then do a job that you don't really want to do for a long time to try to hope that you'll be happy. That could take 10, 15 years. In 3 years, you can change your brain. I could give you some books and you'll be well on your path a lot quicker to being content with a small home and a 2013 Subaru with 150,000 miles on it. And you'll be way faster at achieving a loving relationship because you'll start to love yourself first. And then you can give and pour out of that. It's way easier to start internally than to start externally and then midway through your life realize all this was for naught and I don't even know who I am.
Yeah, it's a scary reality. And our thoughts actually create that reality because what we think determines how we feel, and how we feel determines how we behave. So if we think I am not worthy of love, then we're going to feel like we are not enough. We're going to feel like we're unworthy. And then we're going to behave in a way where we don't take care of ourselves because we don't actually think we're worthy of that. We don't approach someone at a bar when we're out to hit on them because we don't think that we're good enough inside. But if you can actually think, I am inherently worthy no matter what, and then you feel capable, you feel strong, you feel enough, then you go out in the world and you're like, I can apply for that job. I can walk up to that girl at that bar. I can, I can go on that backpacking trip hiking because my body is strong enough. I can go start that business. I can go chase my dreams. So literally our thoughts create our reality because what you think about yourself determines how you're going to act in the world.
The biggest thought in my head that hurts me to this day is the thought of I'm not safe. Anytime the thought comes in that I'm not safe in this house, I'm not safe in this relationship, I'm not safe in the world because of XYZ, whatever, I can convince myself that I'm not safe at any moment. That's the one that ends up triggering in me the thought of I need to do something to get safe. And a lot of people live like they're not safe. And if you don't feel safe deep down, you're subconsciously trying to pursue safety over everything because safety is our number one need. And so it can be financial security, it can be relationship security, it can be anything really where you're just triggering yourself that you're not safe. And if you are safe and you're telling yourself you're not safe, you're going to self-sabotage because you're going to tell the people around you that you're not safe. And they're like, what do you mean? Like, I will tell you I don't feel safe. And you go, Dave, you're gone. You're out of reality. Like, you're perfectly safe right now. There's nothing, like, nothing today is harming you. Like, you're not in the middle of a war. You're not, the house isn't burning down. Nothing's hurting you right now. Why are you acting like something's going on? And it's like, because there's a thought in my head that's telling me I'm not safe. And it's scary.
When do you find that you have that thought? Or when have you had that thought in the past? Like what triggers it?
It can be anything. I think it's just a thought. It's just like a bird that kind of comes and you
Flies
know,
through and sits on the
yeah.
brain perch.
And one of my buddies told me that a long time ago. He's like, your thoughts are like birds. Don't allow them to nest. They fly through, but don't allow them to nest. And if they nest and they're the wrong ones and they're not based in reality, then that's when it becomes a problem. And so it's just a bird. It's like all of a sudden I just don't feel safe. Something just triggers me from my past. Like it could be anything. You say something that there's triggers that I have that I don't even know yet. And so if you say a certain word a certain way and possibly it triggers something from my past that I'm unaware of, all of a sudden I might be looking around at why I'm unsafe and I'll find something if I look hard enough. And then all of a sudden I'm convincing myself that I'm not safe because of the car I drive or because the house isn't remodeled yet or because I need the XYZ to be safe. And the reality is, we need very little to be safe. Like if you actually list out what you need each day, it's crumbs. It's not much. But we convince ourselves that we need all these grand things to be safe and to be accepted in this world and put ourselves through we basically lock ourselves in an 8 to 10 hour a day prison in a cubicle to provide all these luxuries that we never have time to enjoy because we convince ourselves we're not safe without them. If you really believed you were safe without them and you were looking at it, if you could trade an hour of your day for the t-shirt that you buy, you'd be like, I'm not doing that. We don't think of it that way though, and then we end up convincing ourselves that we need the t-shirt because it's not because we really need it. And if you have the money to buy it, buy it. I don't care about it's not about the t-shirt, but it's about the feeling inside and the narrative in your brain when you're sitting there at the rack and you tell, if I owned this, I would be X, Y, and Z. And that narrative can be harmful if you don't have the money to buy the t-shirt. And I felt that as a kid when I was little. I felt like if I didn't have the certain brand clothing, I wasn't going to be accepted at school by my peers, and it wasn't their fault. They probably would have accepted me. It was all a narrative within me and an insecurity within me.
Yeah, I think I could go on a wild tangent about how our society and advertising in general make us all feel like advertising is basically playing at our emotions to try to make us feel that we need things in order to be okay so that they can sell things, which is kind of a sick and twisted part of capitalism, but probably for another podcast.
Fix the narrative in your brain, and you won't fall a slave to the marketing. You'll check it with your intuition and your gut and go, I don't really need that.
Yeah. And that's breaking out of the mold that society tells us we need to live in.
Yeah, and if you're living it and you're having fun and you're enjoying it and you're have a good narrative, like go for it. There's nothing against having a corporate job, especially if it fulfills you in some way. Mine did. I had a lot of reasons why I enjoyed what I did, and the people that I worked with were amazing, and I loved a lot of them. And so it's okay to be a part of it if you want to, but at least with self-talk and becoming aware of the self-talk is getting to know yourself. So at least you know what you want and then you can align with your priorities.
Yeah. I actually don't know if I would agree that self talk is knowing what you want. I think learning to go within yourself to question your thoughts and really dig into what your needs are is how you figure out what you want. Because sometimes self talk will convince me I need things I really don't.
Well, I think that you're right. I think that it's not listening to your self-talk. It doesn't allow you to get to know yourself. But over time, as you watch those thoughts and reality check them, some of them are real. Like I can have a self-talk that I want a loving, healthy relationship with you. And that's a good one. And I subscribe to that. but you now have the ability to click subscribe or unsubscribe. And so I know, like, deep within my soul, and I've had that. It's not just a subconscious narrative. Like, that's a deep yearning and a deep desire that I align with long term, that I want a healthy relationship with you. And I believe that's my purpose. And so you can kind of filter out your purpose versus your subconscious narrative and your need to feel accepted and safe. It really is the separator to be able to see which ones are your insecurities and which one is your purpose.
Mm.
And those are very different.
But if we don't do the work to figure out where it's coming from, we can actually just live from a place of insecurity and fear instead of a place of purpose.
Yes.
And that's so scary. And then you wake up midlife and you buy the Ferrari because you didn't listen to what your purpose was your whole life.
Yeah. It's scary. If you spend your whole life listening to your insecurities and driven by your insecurities, they will drive you the furthest possible from your purpose. Because your purpose most likely is confronting those insecurities, confronting those demons, and befriending them, accepting them as part of you, and living on the edge of that fear, not doing something way beyond what your capabilities are, overcompensating, not staying totally safe and comfortable, but living on the edge of your fear, whatever that thing is that you feel called to do that is in your reach. You're just a little scared to do it. That's probably the thing you need to do.
But it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah, and if you let your self-talk run wild, it'll tell you not to go there. It'll steer you into, well, I need to make sure I have X amount of money each month to pay for these bills because I need to drive that car and it builds these constructs and these literally a bind. It builds a binded situation that you have to live by because it's all linked and spiderwebbed now. You do need tools to do the job, and you can convince yourself it's not about money, it's about your purpose.
Yeah, it's about your purpose. And then also, if you're not ready to embrace that thought and you're like, well, that's pretty extreme and scary, then I would say look it through the lens of it's about your peace.
Mhm.
Because the thoughts that go through your mind that are untrue, that are keeping you up at night and are giving you anxiety, if you can start questioning them and dismantling them and truly just clicking unsubscribe on them, then you can start attaining more peace in your thought life. And that just, I mean, the benefits to that are through the roof. Calming your nervous system, being able to make better decisions, getting more sleep at night. Our thoughts are I mean, I said it before, our thoughts create our reality. They impact us on such a big level.
Yeah. And the hardest thing to learn for me was you are not your thoughts. They do not define you. They're not your feelings. Your feelings are your emotions underneath it and the actual feeling inside your body. Your thoughts are connected to them, but your thoughts are in your mind and your feelings are in your body and your emotion and your emotional self. And realizing that you're not your thoughts and you can start to change them. And you have the right to counter them. I didn't know that. I didn't know I had the right. No one ever told me that the thoughts that I was having weren't helpful for me and it was okay to go above beyond them, to be the master of them, to go, okay, you're having those thoughts, but everybody has those and they're not real. And what you really need to do is rise above the subconscious level to get into the conscious, to get into the being the autonomous human you are. You have to rise above your thought life. You have to take that seat as I'm in control of my mind.
My mind is not in control of me. I'm in control of my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then if you do that, you don't have anyone to blame anymore. You don't have anyone to blame for your life. You don't have anyone to blame for your circumstances. You don't have anyone to blame for your mindset. You're accountable for it all.
Well, I would say no one ever has anyone else to blame but themselves for their lives. However, because I mean, we are all in charge of the decisions that we make, but at the same time, that doesn't mean people don't do it. But once you're able to actually take accountability for your life, for your thoughts, for how your thoughts impact the decisions that you make, and you own them, that's actually when you start to grow and you start living in reality. Because when we're blaming other people for what our life is like, we're not living in reality. You actually can't blame anyone for your life circumstances once you're an adult.
But not everybody believes that.
I'm curious what you think about this. I'd be curious if anyone truly doesn't believe that. And if actually, I would like to say this. Please send me a DM if you
You're going to get
if you
flooded.
disagree.
You're going to get flooded.
No way.
There's so many people that will tell you, I'm in this situation because my ex.
But you chose your ex.
Yeah, so you can argue with those people if you want to spend the time in your DMs arguing them.
No, I don't want to. I'm not going to respond back. I just want to collect the DMs.
I'm telling you, there are maybe not that listen to this podcast, but there are a lot of people out there that do not take accountability and do not believe that they're the reason they're in their life situation. I mean, most people, I would say, don't believe they designed their life. They believe they are a victim of their life circumstances.
Really?
Yes.
Oh. So where I was going to go with this is I thought that everyone agreed consciously.
No.
But subconsciously, we don't. You really think there's people consciously thinking I'm in this life situation because someone other than me?
Yes.
Whoa. We got work to do.
Yes. Yeah, because like bad things happen.
100%.
Like you have had a hard life from things outside of your control.
But I'm in control of my response to those things.
Yes, but not everybody gets that to that. That's a very mature mindset, and not everyone has the emotional maturity to get to that level to go, these things happen to me, and now my journey and my calling is to rise above. Life is gonna throw curveballs. Some are worse than others, 100%. I choose how I respond to those curveballs, and there is a luck of the draw a little bit with where you were born, what family you're born into, what kind of financial there is those things. So people blame that. They blame where they start on the football field. Like, oh, you started on the 50, I started on the 1 on my own 1.
Yeah,
so,
which I can actually, I don't want to say like buy into that, but I can see that perspective. Like I definitely will admit I started way farther ahead in life, given I had a good home life. I had good parents, like a supportive family.
But
like
bad things still happened.
Bad things still happened. Yeah. Yes. But I'll admit I did start farther ahead than many people, but there's also people that were way ahead of me, right? But if we let where we start determine where we end, that's just playing a victim.
Well, and that's the point that I think not everyone gets to, is that tipping point. Because most people stay underneath the veil. They don't lift the veil. They're behind the veil, and they just see their life situation, and they go, I was born into a poor family. Like for me, I'll talk about me. I was born into a family. My dad left when I was young. We never had a lot of money, so I never thought college was a possibility. Just all these situational pieces. So if I'm starting out on my own 5-yard line, let's say I started on the 20. There's a lot of people that start out worse than me, but you have to get past and lift the veil and realize where you started You go, yeah, I started on the 1, or I started on the 5, or I started on the 20. Sorry, I'm using a football analogy, but it doesn't matter where I started. Sitting here and blaming my situation and what's happened to me and my circumstances is going to leave me stuck on the 1 or the 5 or the 20. It's not where I start. It's about moving the ball down and just trying to get further in life as far as you can get and living your life, your journey. And in order to truly live your journey, you have to accept where you started and accept all those things and go, yeah, I didn't get the luck of the draw. And then some people, had it better or worse. It's not comparable. I could have started out poor, but somebody else started really, really wealthy, but their parents were ridiculously mean to them and their self-talk is way worse. Like, I was financially not in the most stable home, but my mom did not deliver me bad self-talk. My mom really did not come down on me a lot. And like, I was blessed to have a very loving and forgiving mother who never created a narrative in my head that I wasn't good enough or couldn't do anything. So my mind always thought of possibilities, and that's what's allowed me to travel so much in life. And I may have started on the 20, but I was able to travel so many yards because
You believed you
I
could
believed I
travel.
could.
Yeah.
And so everybody, you just have to make your journey. You just have to live your journey. And that's where you're talking about. Like, you can't blame anyone for your circumstances. You have to acknowledge, yeah, I didn't get the luck of the draw in the family I was born in or whatever. But once you're an adult, the sky's the limit of what you can be. The books are there. Most of them are free now. Get the Libby app, like download whatever you want. You can make yourself anything.
Yeah. You create your reality.
Now, yes. The resources are more available now than ever before with the internet and YouTube. So really, there's no excuse to not do something with yourself, and at least there's no excuse to not try. But I would say that a lot of people are still sitting there blaming their parents or blaming their ex or their whatever. Imagine you're in a 10, 15-year relationship and someone cheats on you and you're left in shambles. Like, you probably have a little bit of blame and resentment about that, right? Or you were with a narcissist or whatever. So it's sitting there and telling them that, like, well, you chose them. That's tough.
That's
tough.
harsher than what I would say to someone in real life.
I know.
But if it's me and I am cheated on, or in 10 years, I do believe in reflecting and going,
what signs did I miss?
What signs did I miss? Why did I choose someone who cheated?
Well, and also people change and they sometimes let go of their health and let go of their mental health. So like, let's say all of a sudden I let go of myself and became a really terrible person. If you're doing your work, you're going to see the signs.
Yeah.
You'll be like, he's drinking a lot. He's going out late a lot. Like, he's not the same guy that he once was. Like, what do I need to do to boundary him and set myself up to not, like, so you always have options. And when you don't, and life takes something from you and you get robbed or your house burns down and you lose everything you own, you still have to look around and go, now I just, I got sacked 40 yards back. You can't yell at the ref.
You can feel all your feelings.
Yeah.
You can be sad. You can be mad. Yes. You can drop a few F-bombs if you need to, let it out. But ultimately, you make the choice and you have the thoughts in your head that go, okay, I'm back at the 20-yard line. Do you go, I'm just a 20-yard liner now because life keeps throwing things at me and this is where I am and who I am? Or do you go, oh man, I'm back at the 20-yard line, but I've been here before and I can go get to the 40-yard line and the 50, over time. I know I can get back there and I'm going to. That's the difference of if you get there or if you don't, is truly whether you believe you're a person who can or can't.
It really is. Yeah, deep down, it's that self-confidence that you have to rely on. Like, when I was at my worst, I mean, that happened to me. I got sacked pretty far back, and I took some hits, and had just finished a giant remodel and lost the house in a divorce, basically. Like, I couldn't have kept it, and I had to sit there with, you know, half of everything that I thought I owned. So you just get a 50% cut of everything. And then, as a dad, you're looking at paying child support. And luckily I had 50% custody. So I didn't lose my relationship with my kids. But going from 100% to 50%, you're wondering, okay, like, I'm going to lose some relationship here. And so that's a hit too. And so it's just emotional and financial and everything is a huge. So that did actually happen to me, but I had to sit there and go, what did I do that contributed to this? What did I do? How did I not take care of myself? How did I, what led to this? And then I went through the journey. And if you're there and you're in that situation, you are ripe. If you lose and you have a failure or have a loss, you are ripe for an awakening. Because if you stay bitter and you stay resentful, you'll stay stuck. But if you look around and you really start to get curious about why and what you value and why you're so hurt and get to know yourself, and the best thing you can do if you're going through a heartbreak or a loss of some sort is to get to know yourself in that. Befriend your pain, and you will really learn a level of self-awareness that I don't think you can access without the hurt.
Yeah. And I think what I've witnessed in you is in not going to victim mode and taking so much responsibility and accountability for the divorce and how you ended up where you were. You went so hard into figuring out what you did wrong that you were able to completely rebuild who you are and work on every one of those areas. But had you not done the work to realize what you contributed to that, you would continue to
You
do
wouldn't
those
be with
things
me.
and I would not be with you
No.
100%.
Yeah.
And so if you want to get back to the 90-yard line, you have to figure out why you and what you did to get at that 10-yard line.
Yeah.
And until you figure out what you did, you cannot fix it and you're going to stay there. So that's why victim mode is just, you're going to keep being the victim. But if you're willing to see your mistakes, you can stop yourself from repeating them. And it's so powerful.
Yeah, because if you go to date someone, I'll say it from my perspective. If I was going to date someone who had a recent heartbreak or a previous heartbreak, and I was like, oh, what happened there? And they went, that person was just a jerk. They were a terrible person, just XYZ about them, and never talked about themselves, that would be a massive red flag to
The
me.
biggest red flag there is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you think it's not that way. If you're the person that, is doing that, you're like, well, I don't want them to know my failures, but that means you haven't looked at yourself. And if there was a breakup, if there was a heartbreak, you have some accountability in it. I don't know. It gets dicey, so I don't want to make like blanket statements because it could be hurtful to people, but the point is that there's always accountability to be had. And if you do look at it yourself and then you go into a new relationship like I did and go, I don't want to talk about my ex that much. I'll give you like reference or whatever, and you can meet her. Like, but let me tell you about me and my story. And that is a big part of my story is my failures, my shortcomings. And they weren't really like failures. It was all one big growth journey because before I went through those failures, I was even worse. Like, I was worse. And then I was a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better, but I still failed multiple times. And then all leading up to now where I believe I'm the best version I've ever been. And I hope to just continue that momentum. But it's hard to look at it that way.
Yeah. It's in the words of Taylor Swift, I'll stare directly in the sun, but never in the mirror. It's
End it on a Taylor Swift quote.
Of course. Yes. Which
I'm going to end it on a Jesus quote then. The truth shall set you free.
Wow. Two of the most powerful people in history are ending our podcast. What a beautiful ending this is.
Yeah. Love you.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.